Okay.
All right, everybody, welcome. My name's Karen, and I'm an instructional designer for PACE and for all of you. Feel free to reach out to me if you need any help with courses, course design. But today I'm here to welcome you to Professor Rachel Glazner's presentation on engaging your students with Zoom. And Rachel has been a past PACE faculty fellow, and she currently, in addition to her teaching role, leads the Mobile Fellows program and continues to be quite active with PACE. She will be doing another presentation on Friday, September 25th on Bitmoji. So um, if you have a good time today, please go to the PACE website and sign up for that one. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Rachel.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Karen. So, first fun fact is that I live in a that has the slowest internet you can get. So, what you'll see on the screen is actually an action. I call it an action page. This is what I give to my students. And so if all y'all will cameras off, that'll help make sure I don't get kicked out of my own meeting. So thank you for being on. But for those of us that don't have good internet, it does help. I'll stay on camera. So this is one of my first little things I like to show people. I kind of remind my students how we're going to interact for the day. And then I always give them an item. So they have something to do. They're coming into the Zoom. My other Zoom tip right off the bat is a lot of y'all might have noticed that I wasn't on camera. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Zoom fatigue and trying to minimize your amount of time that you're seeing yourself actually helps lower Zoom fatigue. I know that feels kind of strange to some people, but especially when people are entering, you don't need to stare and smile at them. Give yourself a little break and give them something to do. So I know that this is about engagement, so I wanted to just give you a few more tips about Zoom itself. A lot of us are new to using Zoom or streaming services like this to give our classes. So the first thing I want y'all to think about is, what is your goal of your Zoom time? Are you delivering content or are you doing practice problems? And one thing that I would like to urge you to think about is making sure that your Zoom is being as equitable as you can make it. So for example, my Zoom class, I don't have an attendance policy. I have crap internet. What if they do too, and they get kicked out of my session or can't attend because the internet's down? So thinking of small things like that and letting your students know it's okay can help lower their Zoom anxiety. Um, and another tip is just all the cameras in general. I know that we all want this social and personable interaction. So there is a time and place that, but I would kind of urge you not to make it a mandatory part of your course because there are just some situations where turning on a camera might not be possible for students currently. And as y'all could tell, I'm using Zoom. So the first part of this, we'll be highlighting Zoom features. If you do use Teams, we are going to talk about engagement activities you can do, which would be applicable to that. And Teams has some of these features. They're just located like in a different place on the screen. And so the reason I use Zoom actually is for two reasons. One, I love how the screen looks, so it's very much so a personal preference. I like how it projects in the chat and how I can do breakout rooms. But two, because of my house internet not being strong, Teams crashes on me. So if you're a Teams user, that is totally fine too. It's all personal preference for a lot of people at this point. So a little bit more about Zoom fatigue. As I mentioned, looking at yourself on the screen teaching, that actually makes you more tired because you're feeling self-conscious about what you're doing. You know, when you're normally standing in front of a class, you can't see yourself. So it's like, you know, subconsciously stressful about seeing yourself in the Zoom. And so my last tip is, besides giving yourself breaks on the camera, you don't have to be on the whole time, is instead of always teaching to the camera or just screen, because we know a lot of students don't want to be on camera, is to put something on your desk in your eyesight that you teach to. So second fun fact about me today is I collect toys called pops. And so here's a custom made pop of me. See, it says chemistry at the top. So this pop, they're all around in this room actually. But this pop sits right in front of me on my computer. And so to me, I am teaching to that pop. So I am talking to it, I'm directing my emotions at it. And if you haven't tried this yet, I've learned it from somebody else, and it really does help because you feel like you're directing it to something other than a blank screen. Okay, so that's just a few Zoom tips to get us started. So what are we going to cover today? Well, there are 3 different areas. We have our Zoom basics. We do have a very mixed group of faculty with us today. And so I know that some of us are right at the beginning of our Zoom journey, and some of us might have been using it for a while for other purposes in our class. All of this is new to me. I used Zoom for professional development prior to this, maybe meetings with faculty on other campuses, but I never used it with students before. So the way I broke this up was the basic tools are ones that I use every single day and that I think most faculty could learn to use pretty easily. Then the advanced tools, I consider them advanced just because it takes a little more techiness. I don't want to use that word necessarily, but on the faculty side, you know, you have to kind of know where you're going to click to do the advanced tools. And then we're going to talk about ideas. So hoping y'all can give me some engagement ideas. And of course, I have some for y'all too. So all of y'all have been made co-hosts. So when I'm talking about the features, you can actually kind of follow along with me on the screen. So let's jump in it. So the first one is screen sharing. What am I doing right now? I am sharing my screen. And for some faculty, this is new. You might have never projected a talk on the board at all, especially a really good storyteller in your class. And even though that's all well and good, because of Zoom fatigue for yourself and your students, if you're dependent on only your storytelling skills and this kind of conversational skill, it'll become very tiring for you. And so by coming up with some slides that you can share and keep the conversation going that way, again, it's going to help fight that Zoom fatigue. So when you're looking at the sharing screen, I'm actually sharing a PowerPoint. Now I didn't put it in projection mode, but all y'all can see is my PowerPoint. And so I don't actually normally give PowerPoints, but on Zoom, if you click the new share button, for y'all, it's probably at the bottom of the screen. When you click new share, there's a lot of things you can share with Zoom. So you can share your entire screen, and I'm going to switch to that in a second so y'all can see the difference. But if you have a PowerPoint, Zoom is smart enough to know where a PowerPoint is. So what's happening, what y'all are seeing right now is just a PowerPoint screen. You can't see the rest of my screen. So what's the benefit of that to me as a teacher? Well, on the PowerPoint screen, I have it small. So it's only about half, maybe 2/3 of my screen. And then on the right-hand side of my screen, I have the chat window open. And I also have the little pictures of all the participants. So I always chat window open, so if I get a question in real time, you know, it's going to catch my eye and So if you didn't know that Zoom could kind of snap to certain apps, that might be new for you. So it can snap to PowerPoint. It can snap to Chrome. So if you select the Chrome feature, you can make your Chrome window smaller. And oddly enough, it also works with Teams. And it works with a few other apps as well, like Slack. And so let me show you what the difference between looking at it with the PowerPoint versus my whole screen. So I'm going to switch my view and share the entire screen. So now y'all should be able to see my whole PowerPoint. Can y'all see it wiggling around? And you can also see my web browser that's open in the back. So this is an okay way to share, but sometimes it can get a little overwhelming because if you have a lot of windows open or a lot of apps open, you know, it's very easy to. And so hopefully y'all are seeing both screens right now. You can see the PowerPoint and you see the PowerPoint moving and the window in the back. The one downside to sharing to the whole screen is you got to be kind of aware of everything you have on your screen. So maybe you have some tabs open you don't want the students to see, or maybe you have some folders up at the top you wouldn't want students to see, or some people might not want, you know, your students to see your background on your computer. So I'll go ahead and minimize this. My background is Bonnaroo. And so my students always ask me about that. So if you're sharing your whole screen, they can see it all. And that could be a problem for some people. So let me switch back so you can see how my whole screen is going to go away and you will only see the PowerPoint. So I'm going to the new share button and I'm selecting under the basic menu PowerPoint. And so when I select that, the Zoom goes from sharing my entire screen to just the PowerPoint screen. And that's what I mean by snapping it to an app. It purposely will only show and record that one screen instead of the entire screen. So if I wanted this to fill the page, I could still do that. It might be a little larger for y'all if it's like that as well. You know, students have those good eyes, so they don't really complain about the smaller screen. Actually present in PowerPoint mode. I'm not doing that in case I want to switch around to some of my other slides here. Okay, so screen sharing, recommend it, you get that visual. So the other features I get really excited about is you can actually mirror an iOS device. So if you do have an iPad or an iPhone that you want to show students something on, under the new share button, which again, y'all should be able to see the new share button.
No. Rachel, by new share, you mean the share screen, the
Share
green
screen.
button?
Yeah. The green button.
What we can't see is when you click it, what you see. We're not seeing that part of the Zoom interface.
Yeah, so y'all should be able to click it and still options.
Yeah, go ahead and click it, everybody. You're not going to start sharing just by clicking it.
Yeah, so click the share button so you can see the options.
There's no options.
We would have to share screens in order to see the options.
No, if you click new share, it should just open the options.
Can't even get that far.
Oh, wait.
It says it'll stop your screen sharing.
Oh. Okay, I'll take it back over. City. Okay, I didn't know that, so I apologize. So I'll try to be a better storyteller and describe it a little better for y'all. So in the share window, there's a basic and an advanced tab. So the basic tab shows the screen, the whiteboard, and the iOS sharing. So the sharing, again, if you have an iPad or, just threw my headphones, iPad or iPhone, you can click that and it'll mirror your iPad. Now, because my internet issues here, I actually don't share my iPad like that. So my other piece of advice is if you do want to use your iPad is to just log yourself in twice. I usually log myself in twice, and then that way I can share my screen from my iPad. Okay, I'm not going to dive too deep in that because I know a lot of people don't have iPads. So the part that I get super excited about is when you're sharing your screen is the annotation. So y'all should be able to see a button that says annotate, and it looks like a little pencil. Can y'all see that? Now this isn't my account, so I'll see. Y'all's screen probably looks a little different than mine because I'm presenting, so it's probably at the bottom of the screen.
So Rachel, can you annotate while I have my PowerPoint up? I used to be able to do that, and now I can't.
Yes, so I'm on annotate right now, and here's me drawing a zigzag. Can you see it?
How did you do that?
Can y'all see the annotate button?
Nope. No.
No.
Okay.
I think it's because you're sharing.
View options.
No, I use annotate with my student. Okay, somebody who just drew that. Somebody else just drew it.
Okay.
Christy, Karen.
It's up at the top of the screen under view options,
Oh, there it is. Yes.
annotate.
Oh.
Y'all keep taking over my screen. Don't click whiteboard, just click annotate. Yes, when you're sharing this is my PowerPoint, and annotate is just a pen to draw on top of the PowerPoint. And there's some little shapes you can use, like a stamp. I see some people doing that. So this is kind of a nice way for students to interact with you without creating any additional materials. So if you normally have questions that you would kind of walk around and see students work on, you can have them just drop onto your PowerPoint with you. And from the presenter screen, or y'all see it as well, I can save this. Not sure. Oh, my screen keeps going. So I can save this as a picture or a PDF. That way I have a copy of it, or I can also post it for my students later if they want. And it saves it automatically to a folder. So it's really easy to access after the fact. So I get super excited about annotation because especially if you used like our smart boards we have at Pellissippi, this is a good way to replicate that. If you have a Wacom tablet, it does interact with the annotation tool on this. So that makes it a little bit easier to draw. And if you're using this on an app, like on a tablet, like I can use my Apple Pencil to write, and it makes the drawing features a little bit nicer than your mouse. Okay, sorry, we're learning a lot of things right now about this. Okay, so the one that I also use every time is polling. And so when we're looking at polling, there's a lot of ways that we kind of typically think of polling. And y'all know that I'm kind of an app person. So again, when we think of equity in our Zoom sessions, sometimes bringing in outside apps and having students open multiple things at once might be difficult for some of them. So I always recommend you poll your students before you start getting too wild with technology in class. I'm very lucky that my class, they are usually pretty. But using the polling feature here on Zoom is pretty easy to set up. And it helps just students actively participate and give them a voice in your class, other than getting on the camera and getting on the mic. So let's try one. Show y'all how I do it. You'll that I do not create very advanced polls ahead of time. So again, you can imagine this is a chemistry question, but this is a question for now. So I'm going to click the poll and I'm going to launch the polling feature. So you should have a poll that's popped up on your screen with some letter options. So you can see all the poll says is the A, B, C, and D portion. So where the answers are coming from are on the screen. Did y'all see a poll pop up?
Yes.
I see a poll, but when I click on it, nothing happens.
Yes, we can't interact with it.
That's because we're all co-hosts.
Yeah.
We aren't allowed to do the polls, so it's only for the students participating, or participants, regular participants.
Yeah. Okay. Thank y'all for bearing with me with this interesting presentation experience. So,
Learning about co-hosts.
yeah. Usually I am my own co-host, and so it's not a problem. Okay, so my poll, this particular one had A, B, C, D, E, and F. So I will show y'all how to set this up in one moment. But there's a few hiccups with polls in Zoom. The first one is you have to make the poll for each individual meeting. So instead of adding all this excess deep work for yourself by creating questions, coming up with all the answer options in Zoom, and creating a poll, I recommend to make the polling question in your notes as you normally would, just like we have on the screen here. This was the best thing I learned this summer about Zoom. Because originally I was like, I'm teaching organic chemistry, most of it's photos. I can't put photos into a Zoom poll, it's only text. And I was like, this is just never gonna work for my class. What am I gonna do? So this is how I do it. I create slides with my little pictures and answer options that are usually very similar to clicker answer options, just some ABCs, true, false, things like that. And then that way students can give me their answers in real time. So I'll hop over to show y'all how you set this up real fast. Okay. So y'all should be seeing my Zoom meeting screen now. You'll notice that I try to announce what y'all should see as I go, and that's something I do in my classes as well. What if I still had it snapped to the PowerPoint and I forgot to share my full screen? Oddly enough, Zoom doesn't snap to itself. So y'all should be seeing my whole screen probably. And this helps when you're in class if you tell them what you're supposed to be looking at. Okay, so after you set up your meeting, don't edit it. You click on the meeting itself and scroll to the bottom. So down at the bottom, you can make polls on the fly, but I would recommend to make your little basic ones like this ahead of time. So you can see I have a poll here. I've already set some up for this class, but you want to go to add. And then in the title, you want to tell yourself what kind of poll is it. So I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E.
Right now.
What?
Kind of. Thank you.
So you want to give yourself a title to let you know which poll it is. So if I have a true false versus A, B, C, D, I put that in the title. You can turn it on to be anonymous, but I don't do that, and students can't see each other's names anyway. So this does give me a record of kind of who participated that day if I wanted, or you can make it anonymous. So then you'll type your question. Now again, we're just setting up a blank template. So mine always says select the best answers or something like that. It does at least have single choice options and multiple select options. And multiple select's always my personal favorite. So I usually choose that. And then you just type in A, B, C, D, and E in there. Okay, so you're thinking this is it. But think about class. How many polling questions do you think you would normally have in your class? Maybe 2, 3, 4? In Zoom, when you give a poll, it records the answers. But if you do that same poll again in the same session, it'll delete the first set of questions. So I recommend, if you're going to do this, to do it multiple times. So I'm going to add a question, same thing, select the best answer, put your A, B, C's, and D's back in, and you can do that multiple times. That way, in one session, you can actually record multiple and have record of that if you wanted. So again, there's not a lot of frills right now. So all the frills are going to come from my presentation, slides, and the questions that are on the screen. All I'm doing is a digital clicker system that's free and inside of our presentation app. Because again, bringing in more and more apps sometimes just isn't applicable for or available for some students. One thing about polling is once students answer, the teacher is results in real time, but also you can share the results with students. I love doing that because that way, if you say, oh, there's A, and you know one of your students over here answered B, you want to close that feedback loop. You don't want them to wonder, well, why wasn't it B? And so by sharing the results is a good way to show kind of the percentage of the class that got it and also to start a conversation. A lot of times after a poll, I'll ask everybody that put in the correct answer to tell me why they put that. And some people will come on the microphone or some people go in the chat to actually discuss it. So I know polling is something that a lot of people were interested in. So do we have any questions on this right now? No, nobody sees the names on the polls besides the teacher.
Can you see Gary's question there about saving just one page at a time? Is that correct? Gary says that, for example, I annotated on a multiple page PDF in spring and had to save one page because as soon as I scrolled to the next page, the annotations just stayed in place. So had to save, erase, and start fresh with each page.
Yes, it is one at a time. So usually if I do want to share the results with students, I just come over to a PowerPoint like this and plop all those images in. That way it's one file and share that file with students. So with asynchronous, this is not a good way to poll students with asynchronous. And I won't dive too deeply in it, but SurveyMonkey does have a polling feature that's not only asynchronous, but actually allows students to see the cumulative answers as you go. So you might want to look up SurveyMonkey for that.
And Inez had a question about sharing an iPad versus sharing a browser tab. I tried to answer it.
So as I mentioned, I didn't want to dive too deep into iPads because I know not everybody uses these. You mirror your iPad, it mirrors the whole iPad. Or like I said, I prefer to sign myself in twice. So I'm a host and a co-host of my own meeting. That makes the sharing just a little more robust and stable. And then it shares anything on your iPad. So apps, that's why I love it, because in chemistry I have a few apps I like to reference and any of your writing apps.
And then it looks like you've covered most of the things, people polling and whiteboard and annotation, just being more comfortable with using Zoom and any tricks to improve engagement. So you're Uh,
So the more advanced topics are things where you're going to have to give up control a little bit. Also, you're going to have to learn where the tools are in order to be able to keep control in case something does try. Not to try to scare you away for anything of using any of this, but just as I can screen share, my students can screen share. And just as y'all seen today, how can this get out of control? When it's turned on, y'all saw people taking over my screen a few times. And because, you know, I've practiced with this quite often, I knew to go and take it back over myself. So I'm not trying to make it sound negative, but you have to know that these features you got to stay on top of. But I highly encourage you that if you have a discussion-based course, to allow students to screen share. And what actually made me start using screen sharing was with the breakout rooms. I realized students wanted to show their work and a lot of them were willing to do it. And by them sharing their screen, they're in control of the conversation, not just me. And just like how we can annotate on my screen, if a student is sharing, we can annotate on their screen. So I have a few faculty that have more essay writing courses, and they're using the annotation feature to correct people's essays and critiquing it as they go. So the annotation tool with screen sharing has so many ideas. So have y'all used a breakout room? So breakout rooms are my favorite thing. I love having students work in small rooms. Inside of the breakout room, it is shocking to me almost when I started using it this summer, how many students are willing to all of a sudden come on camera, come on the microphone, start talking to each other. Whereas in the whole class, they don't do that because it's a little more intimidating if you have a class of 40 versus your small group of 7 or 8. Breakout rooms, you can assign students to certain breakout rooms. So like I have a group project this semester, so when I start using breakout rooms with them, I will put each student into perspectives. But again, on the teacher side, that is kind of a techier technique because you have to be willing to sit there and click them all in the rooms. If you see anything on Facebook about pre-assigning breakout rooms, that does not work for us. You cannot pre-assign your breakout room unless you know the email a person is using for Zoom. So some schools have Zoom as like part of their email system. So again, that was kind of a social media lie, so don't go down that rabbit hole. But they're really easy to use, especially if you just want fast, random rooms. So when you go to make a breakout room, you can just tell it to randomly put all the students in 5 rooms, for example. So let's try that. I would like to put y'all into some breakout rooms, and what we're gonna do is I want y'all to talk about, you know, some engagement techniques y'all think y'all have used and worked in y'all's sessions. Okay, Karen, I actually don't have a breakout room button on my end. Am I the host?
I am officially the host, but I don't either. You know, I think it's because everybody's a co-host. So I'm going to take the co-host off of everyone.
So if y'all do use breakout rooms, a big change of doing it in this environment now versus doing it in the classroom, because they're not actually face-to-face, you need to make sure they have a clear goal of what they're to do in the breakout room. So I always say, work on these 2 problems or talk about this topic specifically. Don't just hope that they're going to have natural conversation like what might happen in the classroom. With breakout rooms is to make sure they have a goal while they're in there. So a fun tip with breakout rooms is I have my students, and this goes with screen sharing, is I have my students do a few things with working problems or doing some of the online homework problems that we have live on Zoom. And so I tell them to designate somebody in their group, so when we come back to the main session, who's willing to share their screen. And this is really nice if you have 7 or 8 students in each group, because it's pretty likely that at least one person will have the capability to share their screen. So it's not going to hinder the students that might have a harder time with that. But it's been really fun. It's the same kind of reenactment of how I used to do and say, who wants to come to the board and work this problem? So now we go in our breakout problems, and then one person from each group talks about their problem back here on Zoom.
Okay, there might be another
Okay, so
setting. I still don't have breakout rooms, so I'll go into my settings and
yes.
see what might have changed.
Okay.
Sorry to throw
It's
you.
okay. So in a moment too, I can show y'all that almost everything we're talking about besides screen sharing and well, even chat, all of these have to be turned on in your account. And I think it has to be turned on ahead of time. I'm not sure if you can change it in a meeting. So let's talk about some other ideas besides polling. I'm hoping that y'all thought this polling, just having the ABCs and quick clickers will make polling easier for you. But here's a whole bunch of things that's really working really well with my students. So I thought we could try a few of them. My first one is entrance and exit tickets. Or as y'all saw, if y'all at the beginning, or if you came in late, I always have an action screen at the beginning. As you're signing in, you're gonna have something to do in my class. And 9 out of 10 times, it has a question. You're gonna come to chat and tell me about it. Use that chat feature. Students can use it pretty easily. It's one of the features on Zoom. And I think they like using it. So one of the things talking about giving up control with certain features is with the chat. So in my settings, I do have it to where students can message me and their peers privately. There's no in between. And so the reason I do that is because some students, y'all know, are too shy to type their answers if it's just going to be seen by every student, especially in Zoom where their names are attached to it. So I turn on private messaging, so that way if they're feeling shy that day, they're still going to respond, but they'll respond privately to me. And this has really increased my participation with students by allowing them to private chat me their answers. So even if you don't set up a poll with the polling feature ahead of time, use the chat as your poll. Just make sure it's not like a long answer. It's easiest for the teacher to pay attention to, you know, ABCs, true falses, one-word answers, numbers. Especially if you have a larger class, make sure your answer options are kind of small. And then exit ticket. So my exit ticket is always about their chemistry confidence. So it looks something like this. So in their learning journals, they always tell me what is their green topic, what are they confident in, what's their yellow topic, what is something that's muddy that you still need to work on together, and your third topic, your red topic, what stopped your learning this week. So this is on our end of the week class. They write it in their learning journal and they upload it so I can look at it over the weekend. And so I look at everybody's yellow and reds. I forgot to put my stoplight up with this one, but you know, it looks like a stoplight. And so I look at everybody's yellow and red topics, and that's how I start the next week to make sure we clarify any of those before we move on to the next. And love this because they feel like you're giving them, you know, you're listening to where they're struggling and where they're at right now. Okay, some other Some of them, like the reveal your answer. So I try to discourage students from just randomly typing all their answers in the chat. I tell them to wait, and then it's a competition, right? I want you to reveal your answer as fast as you can. And the first one, you know, try to make a little competition. Let's see who gets it first, and let's see how many of you get it right. I try to gamify as much as I can. So with the reveal your answer, I actually use this for the whiteboard quite often. And so the whiteboard's a little bit different than the annotation tool by itself. So y'all should see a whiteboard up on the screen, and y'all can interact with the whiteboard as well. And so for the reveal your answer, I usually do it on the whiteboard. So if y'all want to draw your favorite number, let's just practice this. So draw your favorite number. And so this would be my reveal your answer. Everybody's answering. You can kind of see how it's popping up. You can actually hide students' names in your settings. I don't hide it because this is going to minimize anybody being inappropriate. Good. Karen, don't use the stars. Okay, so there is this stamp that's checks and X's. So when I do the reveal your answer game in my classes, what I do is, okay, everybody, have you revealed your answer? Yeah. So I use the little stamp and I indicate which ones are right and which ones are wrong. So I'm just gonna say all these 7s are the right answer for some reason. Somebody is stamping when they're not right. So I'm gonna say all these are wrong. Okay. And so students really like this because it's a quick, fun, interactive visual of everyone's answers, and also I'm giving an indicator of what's correct and incorrect. So once again, we're going to open the conversation. Anybody who gave the correct answer, do y'all want to talk about it, or vice versa? And again, I'm always trying to close that feedback loop. If you told me an incorrect answer, I want to tell you why it's incorrect, because y'all know it's not just one student thinking it. A lot of students are gonna think that. So up at the, when you're looking at the annotate with the whiteboard, it's the same as the annotate tool as well. It should say draw versus stamp, and they look like little shapes. Some of the features are not, there's not as many features if you're on a mobile device. Good. And I didn't get to show this on the other one, but there is like a little laser pointer if you want to like refer to stuff. And again, I could save this if I wanted to, and that way it's in a little folder for me to reference later. See, y'all are having fun. Y'all like this one? Okay, taking away the whiteboard. So the whiteboard, y'all can probably imagine, this is also going to be good for reflecting and brainstorming. This is not something I use commonly in my personal class, but we have done it in lab, where we have reflected about an idea really quickly that you can put 1 or 2 words. We've done mind maps to try to connect different chemistry topics together. The whiteboard, I think, is easier to use than what we think in our minds, because I've used a ton of whiteboards, and I do find the one on Zoom to be pretty robust, even if you're just using your mouse. Okay, have any of y'all played Box of Lies before? It's from Jimmy Fallon, actually. And so I'm gonna clear everybody's drawings from the whiteboard. So we're gonna practice Box of Lies. With the Box of Lies, I'm gonna describe something, and I'm not gonna give y'all chemistry something, and I want y'all to try to draw it as we go. And this is just supposed to be a game. Okay, so this is an animal, but it has wings. And this particular animal with wings has a very large beak, and that beak is very strong. Sometimes this animal is brightly colored, but sometimes it has distinct coloring. That really strong beak is meant to hammer on wood. I've had one outside my window today. Some of you have referenced this in a cartoon named Woody. Do you think you know what's in the box? Well, a lot of y'all are artistic. So I was trying to describe a woodpecker. Whenever I do these trainings, yes, Woody the Woodpecker, yes, y'all are typing it. I see it now. So what's interesting about this skill, even in the sciences, is I'm trying to get my students to practice their verbal recognition of scientific language. So right now we're working on nomenclature of organic compounds. So I say the name and they draw it for me. And again, not everybody's going to participate. Some students are a little more passive in this game. But again, I try to make things fun and kind of a competition. So it's like, who can draw it the fastest? Who can draw it first? Yeah, good. Gary, you guys an organic compound going, right? So consider this out. It can be really fun in all of your classes. Okay. So one of my last engagement things, and this one, these last few are more techie kind of things, I would say. And again, I've polled my students, so I'm very lucky that my students reflected this semester that most of them have okay internet. And I can only hold my students to the same standards I have with that. But a lot of them are working on a laptop that gives them a little more screen space than maybe a cell phone. So the book Scavenger Hunt. So at Pellissippi, a lot of y'all know that we went through some professional development or had some professional development opportunities at course design. So one of the things that I've added to all my courses is sure that each of my modules have my learning objectives listed at the top. So what we do with this is at the end of the week, we have a lot of end of the week activities. You know, they're reflecting on their learning. So before we do that, book Scavenger Hunt. I tell them to go look at the learning objectives and find one book problem for each learning objective. And we actually do this in our small breakout room. So they're working in small groups of students of about 6 or 7. Let me take a sidebar on that. I don't think I mentioned why I keep saying 6, 7, 8 students. So in a class, I would probably only have 4 students working together. But when we're, if you have 4 students, you probably have at least one student that doesn't want to interact much. You're going to have at least one student that might have some technical difficulties. That leaves us with only 2 students that are truly interacting in the environment besides just kind of listening. So when you do small groups online, I would recommend between 6 and 8 students. That way you have a larger probability of having students that are willing to interact or have the possibility of interacting. Okay, so book Scavenger Hunt. So they go, we have a digital e-text. So they go and they flip the textbook and one problem from the end of the chapter for each learning objective. And they bring them back to me and I write them all down. Come back together and we work all the problems. And there's so many other versions of this to get them using and into their book, e-text or not. I have another professor doing it with me this semester and they're having their students go look for terms. And then they have a open Google Doc and all the students are putting all the terms in there at one time. So instead of the teacher typing the notes, they're typing it. Okay, so those are pretty much all my Zoom features. I apologize that my modeling of most of the features did not work out how I thought.
That was my fault. I apologize, Rachel.
Yeah, so that was not your fault. That kind of happens sometimes because I'm not in my own account. So I will show y'all quickly back on the Zoom. There are so many features. So if you've never went to the Zoom website, it's zoom.us. Yeah, US, and you go to settings, and holy moly, there are so many settings. I don't know what most of them are. But everything we've talked about today is in meeting basic. So in meeting basic settings, you pretty much want almost everything turned on. Chat on, private chat on. If private chat, you can actually turn that off once you start the meeting. So by turning it on, it just gives me the option to turn or off once we get started. File transfer, I actually hate that. It takes download, but I have it on just in case a student me file. You know, the polling options, that needs to be turned on. Who can share? I let all my students share. Again, a lot of this takes some trust part that it doesn't get crazy. Annotation, I make sure that is on for everyone. Whiteboard, on for everyone. Save it every single time. Most of the features are turned on. So this web, a lot of people haven't explored because you kind of download the app and just stick with that. But there's a lot more features on the website. So if you've never checked it out, go check that out there. So the last thing I'll leave y'all with, because I'm sure some people have questions, is you can bring outside apps into the session. I don't have time to show y'all all of these, but I'll send a few of them in the chat. So if I use an outside app, I always select one that will create a shareable link like this. And then I go over to the chat and I send it there. This is actually a end of session form. I'll send it out via email as well. Microsoft Forms works awesome with this. It doesn't pull on your internet too much as well. I always send a link at the beginning of every class to my students of the notes themselves. So that way, if I freeze, they have that. So again, once everybody's kind of logged in, I just go to the chat, send the link. So y'all could click on that if you wanted to try it. Y'all know that Quiz is my favorite app. And all of these are web-based apps. So they work on any device, any browser. These don't take a lot of internet capabilities like some applications. And shameless plug, I am doing a thing with Padlet and Microsoft Forms later this session, like semester, a little training on that. So, you know, again, y'all probably noticed I love to use the chat so much. You could send students things that way and they can open it, whoops, and work on it that way. So what questions do y'all have? I know it's a lot to take in at once. I kind of did that on purpose because there are so many options here and other than just talking and presenting. So what do y'all want to know about?
Hey, Rachel.
Yeah.
This is Julie. I had an emergency right when you were talking about annotations, and I was not able to get onto that whiteboard and draw a beautiful little bird. Could you go through that with me again? If it's, I don't want to take up too much time.
Yes. So again, annotation and whiteboard, they're similar, but not quite the same. I use annotation more because then students can draw on my PowerPoint pretty easily. But if you go to the share button and click whiteboard, it's under the share feature, then that will actually bring the whiteboard up. And as long as I have it turned on for everyone to be able to draw, it can be a free-for-all at that moment to draw.
So how do I get to it? I know as I'm not a host, so I can't see the share possibilities. I know I've shared myself, but right now I'm a student, I guess. So, and
yeah, I think they change everybody back into students.
I don't see that bar that has like the pen and the eraser. I don't see that. Is that something I'm supposed to see?
You need to go to the top of your screen and view options and choose annotate.
Oh, thank
Julie.
you. Awesome. There we are. I can't write with my mouse. I gotta write my name.
Yeah, and again, this does work a little better with a tablet or a Wacom tablet, but you know, most of my students are working on laptops and it seems to work just fine. Especially for like, you know, things where the answer might be a number, just have them write the number on here. That's more fun than typing it. And then you can give them feedback with little check marks.
So where are the check marks? Is that just available? Is that under
No,
stamp?
it should, like, yep, stamp.
I got it. This is fun.
Yeah, I really like the students really like the whiteboard.
So
That is one thing I'm learning is how different Zoom looks for everyone. I think my Zoom looks really different than a lot of people's for some reason. So I need to practice that more myself so I can direct people better. Yeah, and that's what's so great about Annotate and the whiteboard is you can text, draw, stamp. It has a laser pointer. So, you know, just typing in a text here, I mean, students can do that as well. Oddly enough, most of them choose draw.
You could show the poll now, Rachel. People could take it if they want.
Oh, okay. Let me go back. Poll. Relaunch. Yep.
Now people should be able to vote. There you go.
Yeah, again, this was the best piece of advice or best thing I learned for my class this summer was instead of writing all the polling questions outside of my notes, I just keep them in my notes and let, you know, the only thing Zoom is here for is for, you know, record capabilities. And someone mentioned how there's an F on here. I mean, if there's too many answer options, hopefully people know not to choose that one.
Rachel,
Yeah, yep.
how do you make the cute little slide? And do you make a slide for every single question?
Yes. So I tend to use Point to make my slides. You can use Canva as well. My beginning slides were made with, if you want it to be prettier. But yeah, and I see some people drawing on this too, so you can kind of multitask. Okay, people choose an F, you know better. Awesome, so we'll just see what that looks like. Most people chose A, that's awesome. So I'll share your results so y'all can see what it looks like. Again, in my class, half my exams are multiple choice. So this is a practice for your multiple choice, or I do have some where you're just telling me how you feel for the day. So we would share the results and we can kind of see either way. And if it's not 100%, I take the time to talk about why it's not the other ones. But if everybody gets 100, I always share that as like proof. Y'all did it, everybody got 100. So they really like that. Colors. So if the higher one's orange, like the one that's the highest percent will be orange. And then all the other answers will be blue. So when you share the poll results, once you start a poll, there's an option that says launch poll. And then on my side, you have to stop the poll and then you push a button at the bottom that says share results. And you can also stop sharing the results so it'll take the window away from your attendees as well. Do you have any other questions? Well, I hope that y'all got at least one tip from today's session, and I'm always here to help. So if y'all have something more specific you would like to work on, let me know. I'm actually going to email everybody just an end-session survey, and there is a spot there where you can type in ideas if there's something else you think you might want me to talk about later in the semester. But I hope y'all have a good weekend, and I will see y'all later. Bye, y'all. Thanks for coming.